Attack from 808 State. And while 808 are into the latest in high-tech recording, our next group have a preference for low-tech. They're the Loop Orchestra, a four-piece Sydney-based outfit who, as their name suggests, create their sound with the use of tape loops, played on some well-seasoned reel-to-reel machines. In fact, they recently released their debut album, and we went along to the launch where they performed one of the tracks, Suspense.
Well, the Loop Orchestra started when a group of people were doing experimental radio programs on 2SBS FM, which is a public radio station in Sydney, in 1982. And the programs were experimenting, the radio programs themselves were presenting avant-garde or experimental music at the time. We were also doing things with tapes on air, playing tapes backwards, cutting tapes up, and playing loops of tape as well. And then out of that we decided, a group of us decided to formalise it into what we called an orchestra, which initially was going to be an orchestra of not people, but people using machines, where each of these machines would play tape loops, which would be equivalent to a section of the orchestra. So a group of tape loops might play strings, another group might play brass, another group might play percussion, and ultimately the number could be 30, 40, 50 machines in an orchestra, and rather than people all playing instruments. That idea over the years has changed a little bit, and I guess more recently we'd call it a study of pure sound, but still using tape loops as the basic technology.
That is it. That is our whole life's work. These can be a determinate length, it doesn't really matter. The reason that mine are this length is because that's more convenient because of the kind of machine I use. But you can actually have a loop that goes around this room or goes around a building or anything. We've actually had a few of those at some stage. So basically the sound source is like that, and because of the nature of the loop, it's obviously going to be repetition and rhythmical, if you like. But it doesn't necessarily have to be on every section of the tape. It can be just a little bit, and it'll come out, it'll come again, it'll appear again. So we all work with those kind of little mediums.
And played on various machines. Most of them are very old, reel-to-reel tape machines. For the piece Suspense, the sound sources were all concrete, that is, all pre-existing sounds, and it was a study of the way sound and music are constructed for suspense and horror movies. And so it's all taken from scores for those films, generally untreated sections of the scores for those films, from the 1940s through films like Creature from the Black Lagoon of the 1950s, right through to Texas Chainsaw Massacre of the 1970s and Evil Dead of the 1980s. And so they're fragments of sound. It's like deconstructing an existing sound source and reconstructing or structuring something else out of that deconstruction. I think it probably reaches right back to the experiments of the futurists before the First World War in Italy, who had a concept through their manifestos of a symphony of sounds, and those could be street sounds, factory sounds, sounds for the new age, if you like, and that was to them music. I suppose in some ways it's like what you'd expect an audience who go to see abstract painting or installation or performance art to have to do, in place of going and looking at traditional painting, landscape painting, painting where it's all there in front of you and they can see something nice, and something obvious. In this case, like all of the, I guess, avant-garde and experimental music and experimental art, it requires a bit more on the part of the observer to get involved, perhaps a bit more passionately, to think about it a bit more, to think about it a bit more, to think about it a bit more.
There'll be another rare performance by the Loop Orchestra, along with fellow experimentalists Rick Rue and Jim Denley, on the 11th of April at the College of Fine Arts in Sydney. It's part of a multimedia exhibition called Transit Zone, looking at body, space, sound and form. Next week on The Noise, we make our own examination of bodies and sound in a soul special. There'll be some real smooth talking and